welcome everyone to a very special joint playoff Megapicks podcast. I'm Nicholas, joined of course by Andy.
Hello, hello.
And of course, we're from the Countdown Cast Lacrosse podcast, but today we are also joined by Daniel from Prowl the City Podcast.
How's it going, everyone?
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. I mean, this is kind of the first time we've ever done a joint podcast before. You know, we've had people on in the past. We talked about Panther City. We talked about, obviously, other podcasts like Corey from Lax in the Booth, who unfortunately couldn't make it tonight. But yeah, I mean, it's been, I think this is our first time ever having kind of a guest on the podcast where we get to talk about what's coming up this season, which is, of course, the NLL Playoffs. Well, first off, before we get too far, I do want to talk about the final weekend of games. The big thing, obviously, coming from this last week, you know, Panther City kind of knew their fate going into the game against Calgary. Obviously, we wish that game would have came out better. But Rochester, I believe they had, a 3% chance to make the playoffs going into the weekend, and somehow made it.
Yeah, they had the lowest percentage out of everyone, and hey, credit to them that they took care of business. I think getting that first win against Georgia was huge because obviously if they lose that one, they're out of it. So they were able to muster enough moxie and play well to get it done. So really impressive by them. I would have honestly liked to have seen Vancouver or New York possibly make it in, but hey, can't hate on what Rochester did.
Is the bigger story going to be whether Rochester got in, or is it the fact that, let's be honest, the Riptide choked this one away?
They should have made it.
They had everything lined up for them perfectly. And just the way that they, I guess, over the last couple of weeks, it just sucks for them. And especially because that final game is in New York before they go off to Ottawa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it would have been kind of a swan song for them, you know, getting into the playoffs, their first playoffs in the last season and the last game, but it just wasn't in the cards. And Rochester, I mean, give them credit. Like I said, winning back-to-back games in the last week to make that, I mean, hats off to them. But they, of course, made the 8th seed. Panther City was number 7, and number 6, the Halifax Thunderbirds, which wasn't too big of a surprise. They locked up about, a week ago or 2 weeks ago.
It was weird. That entire situation with Halifax has been really weird on what seed they were going to get.
Yeah.
Because going to that final week, Panther City could get high as 3rd, but Halifax couldn't get higher than 5th. I have no idea how that works.
It's strange because I think basically in order for us to move up, we had to finish with the same record as Buffalo, but also a better record than Halifax, just based on how the tiebreakers worked out. And we didn't end up in the worst case situation with an 8th seed, but it still would have been nice to be able to leapfrog Buffalo and put ourselves in better position. Because best case scenario, we would have passed up Albany as well.
Well, yeah, and Albany, I mean, we'll get to them here in a second. They ended up with a 3 spot, but, number 5, it was Georgia. I mean, obviously the Swarm, I would say this, I mean, coming from last season where they almost made the playoffs in the last, 7 weeks or so, they came into this season wanting to prove a point that they could make the playoffs. And so, and obviously having the Thompson brothers doesn't hurt at all.
No, it doesn't at all. I mean, with just age of 4, I think last season it was, I forgot who they were playing at the very end of the year, but I think it was whoever won got in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think that ended up being an overtime loss for Georgia. And, with a rookie goalie, that is heartbreaking, but at least you got to that point. Right. It could be like, I won't call out these 2 teams. And that's funny enough. Las Vegas, they do have Landon Kells, but you only go so far as that. They haven't even sniffed the playoffs at all. And then, I do have to call out the Riptide again, because I'm going to go out and say you have the best player in the league in Jeff Teague. I think he is the best player. And the fact that you haven't made the playoffs with him and you haven't surrounded him with any help in that sense. Because if you go look at the stats, it's just Jeff T, and that's it. I mean, it's just those are the two teams. So with Georgia getting in, I think that you are correct. They wanted to make a statement, and they did.
Yeah, and I mean, get that 5 spot. I mean, they definitely were one of the tougher teams to get past this year, even with our game against them. But I mean, rounded up the top 4. You have Buffalo at 4, Albany, despite losing pretty much every game going into the final, 4 or 5 weeks of the season, they ended up with a 3 seed. San Diego, we'll get to them here in a second. They're at 2, and Toronto at number 1, which, the only team left over from the finals last year was Buffalo. Everybody else, there's some that you kind of expected to be there, but kind of some new faces going in.
Yeah, I don't think anyone really expected Colorado to fall completely out of the picture like they did. Granted, the last few seasons when they were finalists, they weren't exactly a higher seed in those cases either. But for them to miss it completely was pretty surprising. And even Calgary, I think we knew with Kurt Malosky going back home to Vancouver that they might have a little bit of a slip, but them missing out as well, and technically at the hands of Panther City, it was pretty surprising.
For Colorado, I don't think it was more so surprising the fact that Dylan Ward being out for so long for their season. I think it ends up being the reason why, because they were able to start off strong when he wasn't out. And like Calgary, I think you're correct about that. Pretty much just losing your head coach overall kind of just derailed their season. I mean, Christian Del Bianco was so fantastic during the year, but again, it's just, when all things are settled, it's just how do you start, how do you finish, and Calgary just couldn't.
Well, they had the pieces there, but yeah, I think losing your coach like that, you kind of lose that, special leadership in that role, which, talking about Vancouver for 2 seconds, I mean, they had a great push at the end of the season too. I mean, that team looked, dead in the water the first half of the season, and he turned that team around and was able to get them playing more consistently, and not so many negative plays from their end, and almost made the playoffs, but of course did not. But I just find that interesting. A lot of people kind of wrote off Vancouver early on, and they came storming back, kind of like Georgia last year. But yeah, that pretty much lays out the top 8. Real quick, I do want to touch on this. How did we all feel about the no East or West conferences, this wide open standings? How do we feel about that this year?
My time to shine. First, about like you said about Calgary, I think the bigger question now for Calgary isn't the fact that they miss. It's what happens next year, because they have a lot of free agents that are going to be up. And do they stay? Do they go? I would like for Panther City to go grab a couple of those guys.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, not offensively. I would love to have like a Zach Courier.
Yes, absolutely.
Or any of the Couriers, I would love to have one of them. For the East-West, I'll just say this. The league got what they wanted. Mm-hmm. Well, not the league. The eastern half of the league got what they wanted. I've always said that when they went to this league-wide table, that it was to benefit the East teams. And then when you look at the setup right now, 6 of the 8 teams are from the East. Mm-hmm. Panther City would actually not be going to San Diego right now. We'd be sitting here talking about, okay, we're going to have to host one of these Western Conference teams, and possibly go face one of these. And we'd probably go face San Diego in the semifinal, but it is what it is at this point.
Yeah, had it had the same format as last year, it looks like we'd play Saskatchewan, maybe at home. So, we kind of touched upon it last week, Nick. Just that I would have loved to still been able to see guys like Josh Byrne and Dane Smith and all these great Eastern players who the team doesn't really get to face on an annual basis. And so for that, I do like the unified standings. The part of me is a traditionalist, and I love the whole East-West rivalry thing. So it has its pros and its cons, but we're in the playoffs regardless, so I'm happy for that.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, Daniel, I think you said it right. The league did get what they want. They won a lot. I mean, obviously, yes, it's very Eastern heavy, but it created a lot of parity, and it created a lot of situations that, honestly, they wanted to see. They wanted to see teams come down to the final week and fighting for those last few spots, and we got it. I mean, in the first year of them doing it. So I highly doubt they're going to change it anytime soon, at least until they decide if they want to expand more or whatever the case may be. But I think for now, the unified standings are kind of here to stay, unfortunately. But like I said, that leads us into our playoff brackets. We got 8 teams. 2 final questions before we start our picks, because I'm definitely looking forward to that. To each of you, what's the one team everybody in the playoffs should look out for? Daniel, you go first.
I'm going to say, and it's really based off of the last couple weeks for this particular team, but it is the Buffalo Bandits, defending champions. I mean, they've had, by their standards, they had a down year. Matt Vince has not been the player that he was last season, but also Josh Byrne and Dean Smith have literally carried that team over the last couple weeks to get into the spot they have now. I mean, if you were told me after the Panther City game where they beat them that Buffalo would be hosting a game and Panther City would be the 7th seed, I would probably laugh. So good for them. And I'll just turn it over to Andy on that one.
This is going to sound stupid. Buffalo would have probably been my number 1. And the fact that I'm choosing this for my number 1, it feels kind of silly. But Toronto's been the most consistent team all year. Obviously, they're the number 1 seed for a reason. They're great on offense. They're great on defense. Nick Rose is probably the best goalie in the league right now. It's hard to say that they're a dark horse candidate, well, with obviously having home field throughout. But we've had some upsets these past few seasons in terms of obviously Colorado advancing as far as they did. Teams like San Diego kind of flaming out early. So I don't know. I this is a little bit of foreshadowing, but yeah, to me, it's just Toronto's number 1 for a reason. And if I were anyone, I would hope Rochester knocks them out early, because you won't want to face them, especially as the playoffs get deeper and deeper.
Well, I got a question for both of you.
Yeah, go ahead.
And this is actually kind of going off of what Andy just said. Are we really underrating? And it sounds so stupid, but once you really look at it and how I explain this, it will kind of make sense, especially how last year went. Are we underrating Nick Rose? Because I understand he is going to win goal of the year. He's got a .918 right now and an 81 save percentage, but he is nowhere near the MVP ladder. But Christian Del Bianco won it last year.
Well, and Nick Rose is in conversation for MVP as well. So I see,
because if you're going to go off of last year and you're going to give it to Christian Del Bianco when it should have been either Teed or Dane Smith, one of those two should have won it. It should have never been Christian Del Bianco. This is the guy that really should win it if you're going to go based off your criteria of last year.
Yeah, I don't think underrating. I think I would say people expect that play out of him. You know, I'll just, as another example, take Nick Damude, for example. I mean, all in all, he's had a pretty good season. Save percentage wise, I mean, his percentage is up there, but he's been so back and forth. And, you know, so if he was to have a year like a Nick Rose or something like that, everybody be like, yes, MVP, obviously. But because they kind of have that expectation already, I don't know. Well, go ahead, Andy. What were you going to say?
I don't know. To me, he's probably appropriately rated. I do think he's maybe a bit underappreciated. Toronto just being the stud that it is at pretty much all the positions, you're gonna eventually underappreciate some of the guys on the team. So in that sense, it's nice to see this season. I think Lax Mag has Nick Rose maybe number 3, right behind Teat and someone from Buffalo. Josh Bird. Yeah. So I think they're kind of treating him as like, okay, he's arguably the best player on the best team, and he's been consistent all year long. Obviously, sub double digits goals allowed is awesome. I mean, if we're going underrated goalies, I kind of at this point I probably lean a bit towards younger guys like Origlieri or Brett Dobson, or even I'd love to throw Damute in that category. But I mean, I don't know that he'll get it. It kind of depends on whether last year voting Del Bianco as MVP left a sour taste in people's mouth. But I mean, Nick Rose, he's been in the league a long time, so in that sense, I think he might get some love in that sense. It's just, I don't know. Talking with Corey, he's obviously a huge Toronto fan, and so I think the people that follow the game know how valuable he has been to that team, especially this year.
Yeah, he's definitely a key piece, and I think that's what makes him, like you said, not underrated or overrated, but sufficiently rated, I guess.
I think for me, I think it was underappreciated because looking at Del Bianco's stats last year, they're very, very good, like a 928 and an 81. But even though he won MVP, he didn't win. I don't think he won goalie of the year. I think it was Nick Rose that did.
Yeah, but I think MVP sometimes it's just like any other sport. If you have the flashy plays and the flashy saves, and he's making outlets and getting assists pretty much every game,
that is true.
Yeah.
You're gonna get that vote.
But if this was the year to get a goalie as an MVP, I think it would have been this year and not last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but man, I do have to say, each time we play Calgary, I feel like every Del Bianco saves leads to like a full court outlet of some sort to Curry or one of their other guys. So in that sense, I can see where you can kind of have some sway with voters' opinions, like, oh, this guy plays defense and somehow plays offense out of that stationary position. So
can goalies cross the halfway line?
On offense? I believe they can, but I mean,
I want to see Del Bianco in the offensive setting just because his passing is so good.
Just have it run it out there.
That'd be fun. Maybe in a preseason game or something,
right?
Or a scrimmage.
Well, okay. So we just talked about. I mean, we talked about the MVP and which teams to look out for. I would say this: which teams are already in trouble going into the playoffs? Andy, I'll let you go first.
I would say Georgia. Kind of piggyback off what Daniel said earlier. Georgia had I wouldn't call it deflating, but them losing that game to Rochester where they could have essentially knocked them out of the playoffs, losing it at home was it an overtime game? I don't think it was, but it was a 1-goal differential.
Yeah, it was close.
Yeah. I don't think they're in a position to really go that far, especially when they're facing the defending champs. After the overtime loss to us, Buffalo has really been clicking on all cylinders. So, Lyle Thompson's awesome. Brett Dobson's great. Andrew Hughes. They've got a lot of great players, but against Byrne and the Great Dane and Matt Vince when he's locked in and company, I think they're going to have some trouble.
Daniel, what for you?
Oh, I think it's the more obvious one just because of how their season's gone, but it's got to be Albany. I don't really, I mean, they didn't win the last game, but when you look at them, it's the same thing. It was kind of like Rochester last year. Rochester started off so hot and then sizzled really hard, and, credit to Albany for keep going. They started off 6-1. I think they get up to 10 and I think 2, somewhere around that area, but they end up losing, I think, 5 to the last 6 to end the year. And especially with how Halifax is playing, I can, see Albany not making it out.
Yeah, I unfortunately have to agree with you. I think Albany is the team that's kind of going into the playoffs on gas and fumes. Pretty much just kind of like we made it in. We started off hot and then just kind of lost it towards the end of the season, and that's hard. We'll get into it here in a second, but Halifax is a really tough team, and for them to even stand a chance against them, they're going to have to play like they did at the beginning of the year, and definitely not what they did at the end of the year. But, well, of course, the playoffs are set. 8 teams, only one winner out of all of them. We're going to go round by round, and each person's going to go their first round matchups, second round, and then their championships. And then we're going to go through all of our picks, and then we're going to just give a little bit of insight as to why we kind of leaned that way on our pick. But yeah, Daniel, if you want to kick us off, we have all of our games set up. Who do you have winning our first round games coming up this weekend?
Before I do that, it is kind of funny how we just kind of trashed Albany, considering the fact that they went from last place to third, and we're kind of trashing them as if they're like a, kind of like a Toronto or San Diego type deal, or like a Buffalo. So it's a good season for Albany, but
it's a what have you done for me now? Not what did you do for me at the beginning of the season?
Yeah. So we're all the bracket. I'm going my top left corner.
Yeah. So what game are you starting off with?
I'm starting off with the left side of my bracket, the top left, the Toronto Rock and the Rochester Nighthawks. Congratulations, Rochester. You got into the playoffs somehow, some way. Fantastic. Unfortunately, this is where the reg stops, and Toronto's going to move on, and I don't think it's going to be particularly close.
Okay, so Toronto moving on with that. Are you going straight down to Buffalo and Georgia?
I'm going down to Buffalo, Georgia. I'm not going to lie, I think this is going to be the game of the weekend. Out of all 4 games, I think this is going to be the most exciting one. It's so close because both teams are so similar, but going based off kind of the recent trend of each team, I'm going to go ahead and say the defending champions move on and have another rematch against Toronto.
Okay.
And I'm actually going to go down to the Albany game because I'm going to leave Panther City, of course, for last.
Leave it for last.
Of course.
As we just kind of talked about a couple of minutes ago, Albany is struggling. Halifax kind of just middling around. But I really like the way Halifax played in the last couple of weeks. Again, Albany's struggling, but they did get that win. I think it's still going to be a good game. But I'm going to go with the first upset of the weekend. And I'm going to have Halifax moving on against Albany. Yeah, that's my kind of surprise pick there. Okay. And then, of course, the big one for all of us.
for us 3.
Panther City and San Diego. It's going to go one or two ways. And it's going to come down to can Panther City not be, it's such a stupid thing, can it not be a knucklehead? You have the 2 games, and I'm going to be very specific here, and I'm sorry to say this, especially for a team that all 3 of us cover. If Brett Mitchell does not take a stupid penalty in any of these games, Panther City can win this. But based on the recent trend of Panther City and what they've done, I'm sorry to say, I have San Diego moving on.
How dare you? No, just kidding. Just kidding. No, so, honestly, you're right. I would agree with you. We've had both those games against San Diego pretty much in the bag.
And you want to talk about last week too? They had it in the bag. It's just one event happens and it just tumbles down. That's how it's always been for them this season, and that's kind of the ordeal here. But yeah, I have San Diego move. Panther City cannot. It's not even the fact that they're making the dumb penalties and all that. They can't figure out Christopher Leglieri to save their life. And it's always been like that since they've been in the league.
Yeah, Panther City has unfortunately always been San Diego's little brother, but man. So you have San Diego, Halifax, Buffalo, and Toronto moving on in yours. Andy, do you want to start in the same corner?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with the 1 versus 8 matchup. I kind of alluded to this when I talked about my so-called team to watch out for, as if no team's already watching out for them. But that great Philly win to clinch that playoff spot by Rochester. Yeah, it was a good win, but I'd say that was absolutely fool's gold. I mean, Nick Rose, Tom Shriver, Mark Matthews, TD Earl, and Mitch DeSnoop. There's just so many players on Toronto that you can list like, oh, they're one of the best at their position. I think they're going to be too good for Connor Fields, and Hartley did have a good game, but again, yeah, I think it's fool's gold. Toronto's I'm picking them over Rochester. I don't know what the final tally will be, but I won't be surprised if Toronto hits mid-teens and Rochester doesn't break double digits. We'll see how things go, though. Moving down to the 4 and 5 matchup between Buffalo and Georgia. Kind of alluded to this earlier, too. Georgia, I think we split our games with them this year at home and away. But Buffalo's hitting its stride just at the right time. They were able to jump up to 4th place. I think they were tied with us down in the 7-10 range at some point. I think they're going to be able to ride that momentum past Georgia. So out of the left, Toronto advancing past Rochester and Buffalo going past Georgia. Now, here's where things get kind of interesting. Now, I don't have the fullest confidence in Albany. They did right the ship their final week by defeating the Riptide and being able to maintain home court or field advantage, whatever you want to call it. I do think that's going to give them a upper hand versus Halifax. So I think Alex Simmons' perspective, he's got, even with their struggles, I think he's still a top Rookie of the Year candidate. Ty Kurtz, Wagner, or Walker, I think they're going to be able to summon enough of the early season offensive magic to get past Haas's big brother, Shanks, Clark Peterson, Jake Withers. Honestly, just looking at the history of the franchise, and I know, each season's different from another. Albany, more than any team, has showed that. Halifax, unfortunately, I think they peaked pre-pandemic shutdown, and they just have never been able to kind of recapture that same magic. Like, they're always good enough to make the playoffs, but not quite good enough to advance. And with them having to play road game against an upstart Albany team, I think Albany is, I would call it an upset if Albany won, just because of their current struggles, even if they do have home court. But yeah, them being the higher seed and having home court, I think that's going to give them enough of a spark to get past Halifax in their first playoff appearance ever.
Right.
Now, as for Panther City and San Diego, Daniel gave a very stern but fair assessment. I'm kind of known for being a bit more rose-tinted whenever I evaluate our hometown team. I think Panther City has a chance, a pretty good chance, but with a big asterisk. Donville, as we know, got hurt in the last game. If John Donville is able to play along with Tony Malcolm and Patrick Foley, all the so-called rotation regulars, I do think Panther City is going to be able to keep the penalties down and finally get it over the hump and beat San Diego on the road. It's going to be tough. We're going to lose a ton of face-offs. I know that much. But I can't, this is why we do things like have a podcast and everything. We got to support our guys. So I'm going to stay on that bandwagon and say we finally get over the hump and little brother will defeat big brother.
For the third time facing them this year. Yeah. Oh man. I think we all agree. San Diego, Panther City. That's going to be it's gonna be a good game to watch, especially if it's been as close as it has been this year. Well, for mine, I mean, I think for all the reasons you guys have said, Toronto and Rochester. Unfortunately, Toronto is just that much better. Andy, you said, double digits and single digit score. Yeah, I could see this game getting out of hand really fast, and a fourth quarter starting like 16-6 or something like that, and maybe get some trash goals in the last few minutes, but and making it seem closer. But Rochester just doesn't have enough. They just don't have enough star power, to be honest. They don't have the players you need in the playoffs to have that extra push to get you a win, especially against Toronto, who we talk about Buffalo hitting a stride. Toronto's been in that stride pretty much all year. Sure, they fell off a few times, but man, it's hard to find a very bad game with them in it. But yeah, I have Toronto moving on. Buffalo and Georgia. Okay, I literally had Georgia written down because I thought to myself, surely enough, this team can find whatever they had going on earlier this season, and Buffalo, as you mentioned, they have gotten better since we played them. Obviously,
yeah.
But stat on that,
yeah,
since that Panther City game, Buffalo's offense has scored 18, 13, 14, and 14.
Yeah. Obviously, we kind of ticked them off, and we ticked off the fans too. That was honestly that was the best thing from that whole game is me going down after we won and just seeing all the Buffalo fans that did come all pissed off and leaving. But anyway, I literally was like, okay, I think Georgia can find a way to knock them off. But you guys convinced me. The more you talked about it, you convinced me. Buffalo, there's no slowing them down right now. And so I scratched it out. I have it written off right here. Let me see if I can get it in the screen here. But I literally just scratched it out and was like, yep, Buffalo. You guys convinced me. So
condolences to Jeremy Thompson.
I know, but like seriously, the more I thought about it, I was just like, yeah, you're probably right. So I have Buffalo moving on there. Albany and Halifax, I really do think Albany is just, they really are coming into the playoffs on fumes. They are, I feel like maybe winning and getting ahead in the season as they did might have gotten to their head a little bit. They're like, hey, yeah, we're first in the league right now. We're the best team in the NLL. And since then, they've kind of been back and forth, and then they went on a losing streak. And then, yeah, sure, they won their last game. So you're going into the playoffs with a little bit of positive, but I don't think it's enough positive. I think there's still some glaring holes from the end of the season that they have not fixed. So I actually have, Halifax moving on there, which, of course, brings us to San Diego and Panther City. San Diego, I will say this. San Diego is probably the team that should win this game. But if Panther City can, like you pointed out, Daniel, stay away from penalties as the whole game, well, not the whole game, obviously, but stay away from stupid penalties. If B, Andy, like you said, Donville plays, that's a plus for us. That's an extra offensive weapon that we need. But I also say C, if we are the more physical team on that field, then we will win. Now, I don't mean physical as in we're getting fights the whole time and we have penalties rack up against us, but it seems like San Diego pretty much forces their will against us physically. It seems like, I talked about big brother and little brother. It does seem like they are the big brother pushing the little brother around sometimes. We need that to stop, and we need that to stop here. So I actually picked Panther City to get the win. Third time's a charm. Gosh, I hope so. But yeah, Toronto, Buffalo, Halifax, Panther City. I don't know. It might be rose-tinted glasses, but I think we have a shot if we don't severely screw it up.
I will say, not that it necessarily matters, but I do think had Donville not got hurt against Calgary, we would have won that game, because there were times the offense definitely looked lost after he went down.
Yeah, we kind of didn't even discuss that entire game per se, but that entire third quarter changed the game. The Panther City game. I mean, I don't want to get into refereeing, because obviously everyone's got their own, stuff about it. But, I if you guys saw what I was posting on Twitter during that entire game, very rarely do I kind of go off about that. But that entire third quarter, without just a score, everything was about what in the world am I watching? Like I think, with Messenger, I'm shocked he came back from that. And that does kind of worry me with the Panther City stuff was, is everyone healthy? Because Foley obviously isn't. Lintz, I don't know if he's going to come back. Messenger, how the world are you back after that boarding call?
He just told everybody he was fine.
That looked bad. I mean, it's also because I don't think necessarily the hit was bad, obviously. But I think what made it worse was the ref got in the way. So when he lifted up his shoulder, that's when the contact was. It's kind of weird because why I picked San Diego is kind of be the flip opposite of what the second round's going to be for me. Because I can just say this because I ended up asking Tracy Kelusky this last year after Panther City beat Las Vegas for the third straight time in that season. He said it's a very hard to beat a team 3 straight times. And that's why I was on the fence. Like, Panther City wins, I'm going to be elated.
Right.
I'm completely going to be happy. It's going to be amazing. That's fantastic. Your first playoff win, especially against a team that you've really had a bad history with. But also looking at, if Donville plays, if all those guys do come back, I just, how we played. They played well. I'm not gonna lie. They have played very well against this team. Both times they should have won the first time. It's just their mental state late in games. Well, it's second half where it's just anywhere is going to be the difference. And that's why I picked San Diego, because San Diego always seems to have the cooler head about that kind of stuff. And we haven't reached that yet.
Yeah. And picking San Diego is not a bad pick. I mean, that team, we talked about this with Corey. That team was built last year to win now, and they didn't. And here they are again this season. And if they don't win now, they're going to start staring at each other next year and be like, what are we doing wrong? What pieces do we have to change? Because I use the analogy of the Los Angeles Rams. They got Stafford in, and they pulled in pretty much as many pieces as they could because they wanted to win that championship now. That's what San Diego did. They brought in people left and right because they wanted to win that championship last year, and it didn't happen. And so here they are this year in a similar position, and they should win. But if we're anywhere close to the previous 2 games against them and can, like you said, have a cooler head, maybe come out in the second half a little bit better and not let them get back in the game. If we have a 4-goal lead or anything like that, then we have a chance. But that game, we're going to talk about that during our podcast later. And it's just,
I already did, and it was not pleasant. So I'm glad I was able to speak about that.
Yeah.
Before getting on, because I'm not gonna lie, because I don't know how you guys are. A lot of explicits were yelled during that episode.
Yeah, you had to cut those out. Be like, huh.
Oh no, they will be live. I'm sorry, but they will be live. But it wasn't as bad.
Yeah.
Like it's just
you never know. You never know what's going to happen. Playoffs are completely different. That's a different monster, man.
Oh, that is true. I mean, let's be honest. Last year, they honestly should have won that game. And I think if they do have Tracy Kelusky behind the bench in that game in Calgary, they win.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate truth of Panther City's very brief playoff history. It seems like obviously Tracy was out last season, and then this year, the big asterisk of whether John Donville's going to play and run their offense. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. Hopefully who knows, maybe they sat him out as a precaution, because I think we were pretty much locked into 7 at that point, well, with Halifax winning. So, yeah, hopefully we're full strength, and hopefully, the team can prove you wrong.
Right.
I'm more worried about the funny part is that as much as Donville's the bigger player, I'm just so much worried about anyone on the defensive side. Because I do like Elijah Gash. I think he's been a great player. I think he's exactly what you need against San Diego in terms of their physicality. But, it's just if someone goes down again, who's going to step in? Because we're running very thin on defensemen here.
I will say this: for physicality, I was thinking about Gash and the defense. I was thinking also Sheridan. If you want a physical presence on the offense, you get that man out there. And now, obviously, he takes some shots I don't always agree with. But between the legs and around the corner,
every goal's got to be pretty. He doesn't score boring goals.
Yeah, exactly. But I thought of him when I was thinking about physicality. But well, that is our first round games, which brings us to our second round games. Which the first ones were best of one, obviously single game elimination. These ones starts the 2 out of 3, which can be kind of tricky for some teams, but. Andy, I'll let you kick us off on this one. Who do you have for your second round matches, and what do you have going down with that?
Well, as hot as Buffalo is, and as well as they've played as of late since their loss to us, I think Toronto's finally going to get over their Buffalo playoff hump, and they're going to make the finals again. I think this is the year for them. Not that Buffalo doesn't want to repeat, but I do think Toronto in general is a bit hungrier than them. It's been so long since they've won a title. They've got the number 1 seed. It's been literal decades since their first dynasty. So you got to think that Buffalo's knocked them out the past 2 years, and so I think they're going to use all that as a motivation to be able to not shut down, but limit Dane Smith and Josh Byrne as well as they can. I think Nick Rose is going to outplay Matt Vince in this game, and I think Toronto's finally gonna take care of business. I don't remember if they had the higher seed than Buffalo last year, but similar to what I said about Albany and Halifax, I do think that's going to play a role in this series, especially it being best of 3. So I see Toronto advancing. Don't really know, can't really speak on the number of games, but I see them taking care of business. Okay. Now, in terms of the other matchup, who knows? Part of me is thinking maybe one of the reasons I chose Albany to get past Halifax is that, hey, Panther City didn't do too bad against Albany the one time we played. Certainly better than the time we played Halifax. So this may sound crazy, but I'm actually predicting Panther City to beat Albany. I think Albany's magic is going to wear off after they beat Halifax in the first round. And Panther City, hey, they're both young teams, but I think Panther City's got just a twinge of a little bit more experience, and Coach TK is proving himself to be a pretty solid coach that they're going to be able to shut down Simmons and Kurtz and Walker enough. Damude, I have a feeling he's going to outplay Doug Jamieson, and I actually have Panther City advancing to the finals over Albany. So
you've heard of rose-colored glasses? These are this is like
purple.
Yeah, all right. Wow. I don't even know what to say about that. I'll say this. Between Panther City and Albany, I think Panther City is the better team. And if they were to get past that and Albany was to get past there and you have that matchup, I could definitely see Panther City winning it, especially a 2 out of 3 matchup. Yeah. And I mean, for mine, Toronto against Buffalo, you hit it right on the nail. I think Toronto knows that this is their chance, especially with the open format and them being seeded number 1. Then they're not going to get a better chance to have home field throughout and have that place rocking throughout the playoffs. Buffalo, they honestly have had those games this year where it's just like, how did you lose that? I will say this: them losing against Panther City was a how did you lose that game? Because all in all, Buffalo should have been. I mean, you have the defending champion, Buffalo Bandits coming into town, and sure it was away, and sure that probably had a lot to do with it. But man, like that was a game. Obviously, we had to win, and we did. But how did they lose? And so, I think for them, their steam kind of runs out in that round. And yeah, Toronto, I can see that series going to 3 games. But yeah, I see Toronto moving on. So on the other side, yeah, I had Panther City winning. I also had Halifax winning. Again, that's where I kind of see our steam kind of running out. Like if we can get past San Diego, I feel like that will be such a physical game and such a big win for us that we almost exert ourselves, I guess, would be the best way to explain it. And I'm not going to say that we're going to get blown out against Halifax. I think there would be some good games, but I could also see where Halifax just beats us 2-0. And that's the end of the season, which is fine. I mean, we obviously went further than we did last year, and we did a lot better than we thought we would in the playoffs. But I just feel like I can't believe you picked them for the championship.
I can.
Right? We could do it. I just don't think this is that year yet. So I see Halifax moving on, setting up Toronto and Halifax in the championship game. Daniel, what do you got for yours?
Well, and I'm going to call it now. In the actual NLL finals, we have Toronto and Buffalo. I think this is going to be a series that we are going to sit back whenever, I don't want to speak about the elephant in the room between all 3 of us. Whatever happens with this team, way down the road, if, I'm talking like, 5-10 years down the road, if they decide to leave Texas way in the future, and we start reminiscing about the time we got to watch this team in this league, we are going to go look back and we are going to say, this really should have been the finals. It's going to go 3. This is really going to go 3. And I'm going to go out and say, I think 2 of them are going to be in OT. And it makes no sense for me because I'm kind of being hypocritical. Panther City hasn't won against San Diego 2 times, and it's hard to beat a team 3 times. But, kind of makes sense, actually. Forget that, because Buffalo has beaten Toronto both times. And I don't think it's been particularly close. But I think what Andy said about Buffalo and you about, how do they lose this game? It's going to come down to the goaltenders. Can Matt Vince grab his magic from last year and get back to where he needs to be? Or is it just going to be what we've seen this year from Matt Vince? I think Nick Rouse is going to be the MVP of the series. And I'm going to have Toronto going in 3 games. And it is going to be one of the best series this league will see. And for the other side, it's kind of the exact opposite. I don't think this is going to be close at all. I think mostly travel is going to hurt. I don't know whether or not Halifax is going to stay in San Diego during the time between the games, because I think I'm not sure exactly, but I think it's game 1, whenever day it is, and then game 2, I think, is the next week.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if they're going to go back to Halifax. If they're smart, they should stay in San Diego somehow, because to go from Halifax to San Diego and then having to do that all over again that's gonna take a toll on them. So I have San Diego sweeping them in 2 games, and I'm gonna go down with the top. I know it's kind of boring, but the top 2 seeds will be in the final.
I mean, a lot of people pick that for the NCAA tournament a lot. They pick number 1 seeds across the board to make it to the Final Four, but man.
And I do have to say about Toronto, they looked at last year. Like I said, they couldn't get over the hump against Buffalo each time. So what do? They go to Saskatchewan. Give me Mark Matthews. Mark Matthews comes in, and boy, has he delivered 98 points and 31 goals. It's exactly what type of... I think their defense has been one of the best in the league since Panther City's been in the last 3 years. But they had that missing piece. Yes, they have Tom Schreiber and Corey Small, but they always had that missing piece, and that missing piece is now Mark Matthews. I mean, also give to Tom Schreiber, misses 5 games and still puts up 76 points in 13 games. You know, that's fantastic for him. But I have the top 2 seeds going into the fight.
Well, I mean, hey. And honestly, again, as we talked about with San Diego, this is what they want. They want that championship shot. Well, so that leaves you with Toronto and San Diego
in the final.
Andy, you have Panther City and Toronto. I mean, hey, it could happen. You never know. Leaves me with Toronto and Halifax in the final. And the more I think about it, I think it'll be another close series. Halifax is a tough team, but I think the finals is where Nick Rose shines, and I think that's where he separates himself from everybody else. Every other conversation, honestly, I mean, they do MVP after the season. I would say if they make the finals, this is where he locks up that MVP, because I could see him being the difference maker in this series. And it might go through 3 games. I don't think it will. I think it'll be Toronto saying, here's our chance, and we need to take it. And I could see them beating Halifax 2 straight. So after it's all said and done, I think Toronto does make it over the hump. Corey from Lax in the Booth, I hope you're hearing me, because he doesn't think Toronto is going to make it this year. He doesn't think they're going to go very deep. But man, I think they're the team. They're the team to watch out for, and they're the team I think is going to probably win it all this year. So I have Toronto probably winning in 2 games, but winning the NLL championship this year. Daniel, I don't know. What do you got for your finals?
It's gonna go 3 again. It's gonna be like if for people who are gonna watch that Toronto Buffalo series, and if it goes the way I think it's gonna go, and then go into the San Diego, they're gonna have a letdown. But I still think it's gonna be a great series. 2, great goaltenders. They're both. I mean, it is gonna kind of Nick Rose, like you said. I think this is where he's going to shine again. Because when you look at San Diego's offense, I mean, Wesley Berg, 41 goals, 108 points, awesome stats. I'm going to say it out loud. My most hated player in the league, 50 goals, 102 points. Dane Doby gets 24 and 70. And this is also something we never got to talk about when we were discussing Calgary. Curtis Dixon got traded there, and he only put up 64 points. I mean, granted, he did play 13 games. But, I think Mark Matthews has had the bigger impact for Toronto. But I'm going to go ahead and say Toronto gets over the hump. It's going to go 3. And they're going to hoist the trophy. And they're finally going to do exactly what they brought in Mark Matthews in for. That is to win a championship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a reason they're the number 1 seed. So, Andy, I'm very interested. Ears awaiting your prediction for a Panther City Toronto final.
Well, if all goes according to plan, I mean, so far Panther City is definitely would be the Cinderella story of the postseason. Well, just making just getting past San Diego would be a huge shock, and then beating Albany on the road, maybe a little less shocking, but still incredible to see this third-year expansion team from Texas in the finals. However, that's when realism starts to settle in, and I have the Toronto Rock defeating the Panther City Lacrosse Club in a sweep. Just their Cinderella story ends versus the most complete team in the league. I don't think the games will necessarily be all that close. I think Panther City will hit double digits in at least one of them, but they just don't quite have the firepower, the personnel to defeat a really hungry Toronto team. It's going to be a great learning experience for everyone. Poor Callum is still going to have gone another season without a title, but I think they're going to feel a taste of what it's like to play for the biggest prize of them all and come back strong next year, whereas Toronto's going to hoist that trophy in the end and breathe easy.
Wow. All 3 of us, Toronto winner. I mean,
there's something Andy just said that I guess we can talk about later in a later episode when we get together again. Because who ended up watching that the Calgary game, or rewatched it?
Yeah, he rewatched it, and I unfortunately had to watch it while I was working, but yeah.
Did anyone hear the comment with Callum Crawford and how he was emotional pregame? And they said then they kind of nudge that this was his final time in Calgary, even though we would play Calgary in 2 years. Well, is that telling us something that we don't know about what's going to happen next year? And we can discuss this later, but that was just something that when you talk about Cal Crawford, that instantly came into my mind that this might be his last hurrah.
Well, I do know his mother was at that game from what the telecast said, mm-hmm. So I'm sure you're really close, especially with him living all the way down in Oklahoma these days. Just a little, I don't know if this is insider information or anything, but during the autograph meet when I got the Callum in line, after he signed the team roster photo, I said 1 more year, and he was just kind of like, he kind of gave a non-committal, like, we'll see. He's certainly no spring chicken, but he's highly effective. Obviously, as that signing was going on, his kids were playing in the net with, I think Ty Thompson's girlfriend was kind of playing goaltender in the Donville role up top. So he's, he loves the game. Obviously, when you get older, your priorities change and whatnot, and health is key too. I'm hoping he plays as long as he's effective and is motivated. Whether he feels that time is coming at an end or not, I can't say, but yeah, I'm going to be pretty bummed when he hangs it up.
He can play the Dane Dobie role. I mean, he
retire and come back halfway.
I mean, and I'm not the mirror role, but like Dane Dobie had I think 27 goals. Cal Crawford.
Oh yeah,
he missed 2 games, was on 94 points. He still has it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
42. He has 42 goals. He's still got it. It's just, when is it going to be time?
Yeah,
because time is running out here for him.
Actually, somewhat relevant question on that. Do you feel that Callum is more likely to be a scratch or not play if it's a long travel road game, like if he's got to travel like quite a ways up east or something.
I mean, obviously,
it's just coincidental when he misses a road game here or there.
I mean, obviously, I think he'll play San Diego no matter what. But you're talking about like in the next round if they have to fly back and forth to Albany and all that.
Oh, I'm just talking about this past season, thinking about his career as like a whole, because I know part of him playing with Panther City is, hey, he's made his home in Tulsa. It's not too long of a commute, all things considered. Doesn't have to get those frequent flyer miles.
I think this year he was injured, but it just depends on whether or not. I'm more shocked that, thinking about it now, since he's been here, I guess the question is, why didn't we grab him in the expansion draft? I'm not sure if he was protected or not. I don't really remember, but we picked Ryan Benesh, and then we shipped him out right away. And Howard Callum, knowing that he's from Tulsa and knowing the situation of last year of, hey, I'm not going to play anymore, and I don't want to be here in New York, but he's sending me somewhere else where I will retire, and I think this was his destination. And for him to be here, I think helps. But then again, at the end of the day, it's, on him. And now the question is, does he become a coach of some sort when he leaves? Or is he just going to go right off to the sunset? Because I can see him coming back and not play, but be in a coaching role. Like if it's an assistant or player personnel, I can see him being there, because what I want him to do, I want him to take Ryan Sheridan underneath his wing and teach him everything, because Ryan Sheridan's got a little bit of Cal Crawford to him. He likes taking guys one-on-one, but if he does decide to hang it up, I'm not gonna lie, call Calgary, do whatever it takes to get get Jesse King down here. If Jesse King doesn't want to play in Calgary, and this is all hypothetical, do whatever it takes to get him down here if there's any hint of him not wanting to be in Calgary. If Callum decides to hang it up, because that is such a big void that this team is going to miss, and it will show next year.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it on our show too. Just Callum's been that constant veteran leadership that they've needed in the offense this year. And yeah, if he does, call it quits after this year, I mean, like you pointed out, he's pretty much had one of his best seasons ever this year. And at his age, he's better than 80% of the league, it seems like, on some nights. But man, I don't know. He just, I think Andy points it out too. Like his kids are getting older. I know that has a little bit to do with it, and he won't be able to make all the games. I could see a situation where, yeah, he does retire, and then as the season goes on, he kind of gets that itch again, and he's like, I wasn't that bad that last year, and I've gotten to rest, and they got 8 games left. I can go play 8 games. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I hate to say that this was the Callum Crawford section of the podcast, but yeah, I mean, whatever happens, I'm one of those fans that I was just glad I got to see it. Like, if this is his last year, if we don't win in San Diego, and he just kind of says, all right, well, that was my last chance, I'm glad we got to see it.
And if it isn't, I doubt he does this. Does he go to Panther City and go, hey, get me out? I'll try to, I don't want to say glory hunt, but, and I have no problem with that. Like, the jersey I'm wearing, the most, talking about loyal superstars, when it was coming around that golden, I kind of want to deviate to the NBA real quick and then go right back in. When Dirk was looking to, whether or not he was going to retire, Golden State goes, hey, we'll take him for 1 year. And I'm like, okay, green chasing is stupid in my opinion. Unless you're just brought in to do stuff like the Kevin Durant stuff we can talk about all day long. If Dirk decided to go to Golden State, I was fine with it. For me and Callum Crawford, if you want to go to, and no one's even close, go send him off to San Diego. Let him go have fun. Let him go replace Dane Doby. Go have fun. Go get your championship and ride off to the sunset. And we can trade him there. I'm fine with that. I want him to get a ring. He's been in the league since 2006. He's never won it. And, you know, I want him to be, because he's done so much for this team and this community, especially in the surrounding area. You know, you want him to achieve what he wants. Mm-hmm. So who knows what's going to happen, because, again, it's all speculative. But, you know, if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. For me, I want to know before the draft. Mm-hmm.
So we need.
So we know what we need. And if he wants to leave or whatever he wants, get it done now so we can focus on next year.
Yeah. I think that as interesting as last offseason was for Panther City, I feel like the one coming up is even going to be even more, because I don't know. Depending on how this season ends, I see some more pieces being shuffled around a little bit more. But
I have one big thing about what, also, we know what the biggest need for this team is, but there's one massive thing they need to do this year that we can talk about later when it gets to it. But yeah, like I think things will be shuffled around. I don't think more so offensively. I think just back end, yeah, but I can see a lot of this team changing.
Which, you know, if they have it, like Andy pointed out, if they make the championship game, might not be as much as we think it is. but
run it back. Yeah.
Run it back for next year. But, yeah. But going back to the playoffs real quick, I just want to say, you know, it is very interesting. We all have Toronto making it. I think we all have just kind of the same feelings about that team. They're the number one seed for a reason. Their goalie, Nick Rose, is goalie of the year, probably MVP candidate for sure, for a reason. And they're the team that should win. Now, as we see, playoffs are just their own kind of mess, but and anything could happen. I don't know. Just final thoughts on the overall playoffs coming into it. Andy, you want to kick us off? What are you kind of looking forward to in these playoffs? And just, yeah, I mean, what do you want to see in these upcoming playoffs as we go forward?
The same thing I love about the NLL playoffs is the same thing that I kind of dread whenever Panther City makes it, and that it's the first round single elimination, and the rounds after that, they're longer, but you still just have to win 2 games. And so I feel like there's a bit more potential for upsets to happen. If a team rests on their laurels or just happens to have a bad shooting night, or the other team that people expected to lose just plays out of their mind. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case this year. Toronto's really proven themselves all season long. It's just kind of coincidence that the team that they've had the most trouble with is their prospective semifinal opponent, and their team that's had Toronto's number the past year. So even though I've picked Toronto, hey, I could see anything happening. Now, can I see Panther City beating Toronto? Maybe not, but like I said, hey, you never know. Maybe guys will play out of their mind and whatnot. So anyway, I'm just really, I would have loved to have seen us get at least one home game and get into that 3 or 4 spot. I know there was a lot of dominoes that had to fall our way with Albany, Halifax, Buffalo, what have you. And unfortunately, only one or none of those things happened. But hey, I do kind of like that we're facing a familiar foe in San Diego, even though it is a foe that we've had issues with over the years. If anything, the 2 games this year, like y'all alluded to, showed that we can hang with this team and even take a big lead on them. if we play smart, disciplined lacrosse. It's just a matter of putting all that together, not losing our composure. And then y'all also mentioned matching their physicality. Last year when we faced San Diego, that's one thing I noticed. Like, I don't even know if it's scientifically true, but their players just seem like, I don't know if they were bigger, but we seem to get pushed around. Whereas this season, I saw a lot less of that. Well, with us picking up guys like Knox and Sheridan, and heck, even Mitchell, despite all the penalty issues, like, though, that sort of physicality is something that was a welcome sight against San Diego. That's probably why I'm kind of, I do have these rose-tinted glasses and think, hey, third time's the charm. We're finally going to take care of business against them. So, yeah, it's an exciting time. I'm hoping that we get to see more than one playoff game with Panther City in it. Yeah, going to be a fun ride.
I hope we do get a home game. Real quick about your comments about San Diego being bigger and taller or whatever than us. All that makes me think of is, I'm sure you guys have seen the Mighty Ducks, right? Mm-hmm. Second one. So they're going against Iceland, and they're bigger than us. They're stronger than us. They have more facial hair than us. So yeah, I mean, you saying that makes me think of that. But they were able to come back and beat Iceland in the end. Maybe we can come back and beat San Diego. Daniel, your final thoughts on these playoffs?
Watch us all be wrong and at the Rochester Panther City final.
That's
Rochester somehow makes it through from the 8th seed all the way to the championship.
Man. And then, oddly enough, their team I would not want to see.
Yeah, no, not at all. If you want to talk about a team that has had Panther City's number, it has been Rochester the last 2 times we have faced them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it hasn't been particularly close.
Yeah.
And I want to actually flip it back onto you after my comments here. The question's going to be, with the record they have now and with the league-wide standings, do you think this team, regardless of how the playoffs go, did the regular season exceed, meet, or underperform your expectations? Because for me, I'm going to be quite honest, I think they underperformed just by, I can pick out the games this Calgary game, that's a winnable game that they couldn't get over the line. Halifax, they don't show up. And this is, this is probably the biggest key to the game. And this San Diego game is going to be what I talk about for these next couple games. Halifax, there. Rochester, Georgia in Georgia. Can this team start off well? Mm-hmm. And if they don't, then it's going to be a quick game. That's the biggest thing, because that Georgia game, they should have won. I know it's, 10-12, but if they show up at decently in that first half, I think they win. Of course, the Vegas game where they choked to the final 10 seconds. I'm not even going to talk about the Rush game because we don't beat them there. So the San Diego home game, that's a game that was won. And they choked that one. Halifax, same thing. If they show up in the first half, the entire game is different. And I think the rest are fine. That, the Calgary game in the second half, if they let that entire third quarter, especially after the major, get in their head too much. And that was a winnable game. You look at there, I said in the beginning of the season, I thought they would be kind of leaning towards I said they make the playoffs. I think right away I said they're going to make the playoffs, which, does meet my expectation. But I said I think they would have been in the top 4 situation, maybe 4 or 5, just because, I saw Calgary going down. I saw Saskatchewan going down. I saw Colorado going down. I just saw, based on the season we had and adding the pieces we did, I thought they would have been a lot better than they're a lot better than what their record shows, which is why I think they kind of underperformed than what they did. I'm glad they made the playoffs, but we really should be talking about them hosting a playoff game this week.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question as far as the season for Panther City, look, yes, they are a better team than their record shows. There's all those games that we should have won, and yes, I wholeheartedly agree with you. We should have been in a position to have the playoff spot locked up weeks ago, and be worried about, hey, are we going to have home field throughout? Are we going to have home field for a few rounds? What are we going to do? But waiting until the last week to get that spot, it's, again, looking at the whole playoff picture, it's kind of like Rochester. Like, you have your positives to take from the last week and getting in, but there's still a lot of negatives and a lot of stuff that needs to be fixed for this team to succeed in the future. Going from, like I said, talked about Albany, even the holes they had didn't go away. They were just able to cover them up early in the season. And so, I think Panther City is a better team than their record shows, but unfortunately, that's just kind of the season they've had. Andy, you have any final thoughts on that?
If you're taking things in a vacuum, I think this season was a wash compared to last year's. Last year, I'd say we beat the teams we are expected to beat, say the Las Vegases and the Vancouvers of the Western Division. This year, there was a lot, well, maybe not a lot more, but there was certainly more variance. Vegas is a team we should beat. We lost one of our games of them. We absolutely throttled them in the other game. Buffalo is a team that I picked us to win, though that was kind of wishful thinking. And then when we did, it was that much more of a pleasant surprise. Albany, I knew they had been kind of on a losing streak, but hey, the record still shows the success they've had this season. We managed to beat them. We managed to finally beat Georgia as well. All the while losing games to Rochester at home, the Vegas overtime game at home. So it's I'm glad to see us beat an elite team like Buffalo, but it was even out by the losses that should have been wins. So I'd say it's a wash. Like, we did finish with a slightly worse record, but we had to face tougher teams than we did last year. Aside from Buffalo and Albany, you could say, well, okay, this isn't anything new. We're losing to the Torontos or the Halifaxes and San Diego's of the league, but at the same time, the San Diego games were a lot closer than they were last season and whatnot. So overall, I'd say I saw moments of growth and moments of regression, which made it seem pretty similar to last year. Now, when you put those together, it's definitely, for me, a slightly disappointing year. We didn't really know how the unified standings were going to shake out. My impression, just as a pretty new fan to the NLL, was that most of the powerhouse teams were in the East. And, we've talked about it already. That's the way the playoffs shook out. That's the kind of bore some truth to it. So it's disappointing in that sense that we didn't do better, but not entirely unexpected, knowing some of the really good teams in the league that we were going to see this year.
Well, and obviously those really two good teams, I mean, all of them are in the playoffs. I mean, Halifax, we struggled against them. They're in. Buffalo, even though we got a win, we obviously triggered something in them. They're on a hot streak. The game against Toronto, honestly, I kind of forget that we faced Toronto because
I was happy we made it competitive. That's all I care about.
Yeah,
I was glad we made it competitive because that when that happened, I'm like, okay, this might,
that's my work.
They're going to this team. At that point, that team was 1-2,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm thinking, well, this team should be 2-1,
Mm-hmm.
but the fact that it was only a 3-goal loss,
Mm-hmm.
it brought me hope, and then. That road trip happened where they go 2-2,
Mm-hmm.
where in reality, it should have been like a 3-1. And then like that's probably just the biggest thing is I think it was more so a consistency issue with this team because, I mean, I don't want to, get into the offense because they were, really good this season compared to last year, although they did not set the record for most goals in a season for us. I think we're off on like a couple. There's the consistency issues in the offense because there will be times where they'll have, multiple 10-minute goal streaks.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when they don't start off hot. And that's just, it gets only like when Nick Damude got pulled, I can talk about like the Halifax game. I felt bad that we pulled Nick Damude because I'm looking at him and I'm going, Nick, that is not your fault at all. When you see the goals that were scored on him, like it was really, really, really bad. And then he comes down and puts up I would probably say his best performance of the year was against Buffalo. Right. You can say that, might be against Philly. It's, just the level of star power in Buffalo. And he pulls off, I think it was like, 54 saves again?
Yeah.
It's just one of those where it's just a consistency issue. And if they would just start off okay-ish, especially when it comes to on the road, I think that's also been an issue. If they would start okay-ish, especially like in San Diego, they start off okay-ish, they'll be okay. And I think that's going to be a big deal for that game is if they're just consistently good to start games, this team could have been so much better. And I think that's just more annoyance. But then again, we're in the playoffs. So, that cancels it all out. And again, I want East-West back. Bring that back. I wanted a home game. Looking back at it. So, and let's be honest here. If it was East-West, Andy is correct. We wouldn't have to face teams like Buffalo. We wouldn't have to go face like, Albany was like a one-off deal. Facing Toronto, don't have to do that. You can get rid of the Toronto game. Maybe Buffalo goes and you take the Riptide and you put them down here, which I know is coming next year. That's going to be fun to see Jeff Teed actually play with the Ottawa Black Bears. Mm-hmm. But, you get rid of Toronto, you put in a Vegas game or a Vancouver game. You take the Georgia game out, maybe it's another Calgary game. It's just, for me, and I know we kind of all agree, it is kind of disappointing. But, we really shouldn't be taking this for granted either because this is the third year. And if you would have told me, especially when this team, let's say about halfway through the year of year one, if you would have told me at that point that this team would go on, get eliminated on the penultimate weekend of the year, the first season, make the playoffs the next year, then make it again, I would have gone, there's no way. Maybe year 3, because when I first did this, I thought this would be the year they could squeak in, which is what they kind of did. But I think it's more so their, potential just skyrocketed after that big run they had in the first year and were ahead of schedule. Right. So maybe we should be, is it disappointing? Yes, but you're in the playoffs for the second year. And not a lot of teams can really say that. And especially with having the record we did. I forgot who ended up tweeting it out. But if we would have won one of those winnable games, we would have been up there with like San Diego. I think it was San Diego, Halifax, Buffalo, and Toronto as the only teams to win 10 plus games the last 2 years. Yeah. So, I mean, that's just why they could be better. But then again, they're in the playoffs, and that just, that's better than just missing it.
Yeah. And I think our expectations for this team this year was why, we were a little bit disappointed because we saw what they did last year and we expected more this year. But, as we wind up here, I am looking at the schedule for this weekend. Obviously, they're all Eastern times, but you have Rochester against Toronto, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Saturday, which is an interesting early start time, but I guess I get it for their sake, for Toronto's sake.
I think I know why there. I think it's because of the Maple Leafs.
We're
Pretty sure that's the reason why.
I can see that. Which, by the way, hats off to the Maple Leafs coming back and and actually tying that series up. I know this episode is going to be out after the fact, but great game by them last night. And then you have Georgia at Buffalo, 7 p.m. Eastern, and Panther City with another late game, of course, out there in San Diego, but 10 p.m. start time, 9 p.m. Central. I hate to say it, but I'm unfortunately going to be out of town, so I will not be attending the watch party this year. So
you'll be in San Diego, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. No. Unfortunately, I'll be in Houston, but that's my other life. And then Sunday, Halifax going to Albany. That's 3 p.m. Eastern. Interesting slate. I 2 seconds on this. I really wish they would do 2 games on Saturday and 2 games on Sunday. I understand you have a lot of stuff going against you, TV schedule wise, and obviously other teams, but it would have been nice to have 2 and 2. But man, great slate. I honestly can't wait. I mean, playoffs for me is always honestly the best time to watch any kind of sport. I mean, that's why I love watching hockey during playoffs, football, basketball. I'm a little back and forth. I know you guys are more basketball fans, not so much on my end, but you got your teams. I see you there with your Dallas and your San Antonio. But as we wrap this out, Panther City, hey, playoffs are always good for us. As we wrap this up, thank you all for listening. Daniel, where can everybody find you on social media and online?
Both the accounts have the same name. They're, if you want to, I guess I'm gonna call it Twitter. I'm sorry, guys. It's Twitter to me. It will always be Twitter. I can't say X. Twitter and Instagram at Prowl the City Pod. So just get rid of the cast on that, and I should pop up. And that's about it.
Where can everybody find your podcast? I know you're on most major streaming ones, but is there one?
But most major, usually, I mean, we both use Buzzsprout. Shout out Buzzsprout.
Right.
Not sponsored, but I love them. I am mostly on all big ones, although it is weird. I just got kicked off of Google. I'm not sure if you guys did too, because Google Podcasts is shut down.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, if anyone ends up taking that. iHeartRadio. I want to try to get on some more, but those are kind of the main ones. But then again, if you have Apple or Spotify, you should be okay.
Gotcha. Well, of course, check his podcast out as well. Of course, you can find myself and Andy. We're on Instagram, X/Twitter. I mean, Twitter's, obviously the name that runs the most out there. Unfortunately, Facebook, but that one doesn't get as highlighted as much anymore. And plus, you can find our videos on YouTube. Well, first of all, or lastly, I should say, thank you guys both for hopping on tonight, talking about the playoffs. I know I can't wait. I know you guys can't wait, but thank you all for joining us. Here's to a good playoffs. I'm once again Nicholas.
And I'm once again Andy.
And you're
Daniel.
and we'll see y'all next time. Have a good night, everybody.
Sweet. Cheers, y'all.